This is just weird. Now this is the right size cup of coffee. Hello everyone! It's Wednesday, December 3rd, 2008, and this is WFTL Bytes, your occasiodaily FOSS and Linux news show with your host, me, Marcel Gagné. Remember, WFTL Bytes.com is the website. And, you know, I had a really tough time trying to pick out stories today because there's an awful lot of weirdness going on out there. So, to celebrate that, I'm going to put on my press hat sideways. Weirdness, press hat sideways. I'm going to lead off at the top with a story from Business Week. Now, Stuart Cohen is a former CEO of Open Source Development Labs, OSDL, and he writes an op-ed piece where he talks about the open source software business model being broken. Now, this is interesting because, of course, I just had a story in the last Bytes about supposedly Linux being broken and how to fix it. Well, now, apparently, the open source business model is broken. And it's because it's kind of hard to make money, apparently. And here's what he says. He says, and I quote, "And therein lies the great paradox. Open source code is generally great code, not requiring much support. So, open source companies that rely only on service and support alone are not long for this world." So here's the problem. Open source code is great stuff. It doesn't have a lot of problems. It doesn't fall apart too often. So if you go out there and you try to sell support contracts and service and so forth, people don't need you because it just works. Isn't that just terrible? Anyway, so this goes right back to this whole notion of monetizing open source and trying to come up with other ways to make money, which companies, of course, like Red Hat and Novell seem to have figured out how to do. Speaking of companies that are on hard times, IT Wire reports that Mandriva, yes, Mandriva has fallen on hard times yet again. Karma or no karma, things just aren't looking up, and apparently it's the global economic crisis, tough times, blah, 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 and so forth. Anyway, they name one person in the article, which is Adam Williamson, the moderator of the Mandriva forums, the English language voice, so to speak, for Mandriva, has been canned because they've canceled all external contracts. Now, there's another article which is actually in a website. It's an Italian language website. However, this article is actually in English, and you should take a look at the links at the bottom because it's really quite interesting. It's called elinux.it is the website, and they actually get into the story quite a little bit deeper and what people think of the Mandriva CEO's decision and what's been happening out there. And, of course, they talk about other companies and how they're dealing with it. It's actually kind of fascinating. I think you should probably check that one out. Over at ZDNet, Adam O'Donnell reports that viruses have hit 75% of a U.S. military base in Afghanistan. Yes, apparently they were having problems a little while ago, which forced the military to ban all USB drives and external drives, from the base because of the problems that they're having. In fact, they've raised the Infocon status, which is the information technology version of the DEFCON status, because things are looking up. Apparently, the military, quote, relies on commodity desktops for its work. Now, what I find really interesting is they're banning USB drives, they're taking all these, they're taking all these extreme measures and so forth. The bottom line is they got hit with a virus on Microsoft desktops. Perhaps you would think that they might reconsider the commodity desktops because maybe that's where the problem is in the first place. Linux, FOSS, open source, better security, dudes. You know, this might have something to do with a story that's happening over at Boycott Novell. They're showing a bunch of letters and apparently secret internal documents that show that Microsoft actually pays people to recommend them. Yes, you know those things that you see, our company recommends Microsoft Vista for your computer that you're buying from us? Well, apparently that's because Microsoft is actually saying, hey, recommend us and we'll give you some money. Apparently this is a super secret thing, and, I find that kind of rather odd argument because don't we all know this? Isn't this like old news? Of course they pay people to recommend them. I mean, other companies pay people to recommend them. It's just, I'm not sure why this is super secret stuff, but perhaps the military has fallen for this. They saw the little logo that says, we recommend Microsoft Vista for your new computer, and they went, hey, that's an idea. Okay, anyway, let's move on. Over at Linux Journal, Justin Ryan reports that there is no longer to be an EULA, the end user license agreement that everybody hates, click here to accept the license and so forth. Yes, in OpenSUSE, Joe Zonker-Brockmeyer has reported that reported to Linux Journal that they're just not going to do that anymore. What they've got now is your classic open source license that basically lists, here's the GPL, here's the information that you need to know, and there's no click to accept. That's gone. Now, apparently, that's actually based on the Fedora version of the license, Zonker says. because why reinvent the wheel? It works. That's one of the cool things about open source. You know, you get to play off each other. You get to work with what other people have done. So that's kind of cool. Over at Information Week Canada, I find that's really kind of fascinating. There's a Quebec retailer named Carnello Corelli who has just been busted for counterfeiting some of that commodity software from Microsoft. Yes, he's been ordered to pay $100,000 or spend 60 days in the slammer. This is apparently not the first time that Corelli's done this sort of thing. In 2006, he was fined $20,000 for piracy. Yes, pirating Microsoft software yet again. And apparently this is for infringements up to $500,000. $20,000 is actually the maximum penalty for this piracy thing. And in 2007, Symantec sued him, wait for this, for copyright infringement. Listen, dude, I've got some advice for you. The best way to not have to deal with this stuff other than paying the money that Microsoft should be getting, because let's face it, it's their software, they want money, they should get it. Use free and open source software, dude. I mean, you can make copies of it, you can download it, you can share it with people, you can install it on as many computers as you want, and you won't get in trouble for it. GPL says you can do that. You can make copies, you can install it. You won't go to jail, you won't have to pay big fines. What is it with people? I just don't get this. And finally, over at Free Software Magazine, I'm going to report this just because I find this interesting. I had a little story about Dillo releasing a new version. Dillo is a really slick, it's really scaled down. It's not particularly fancy, but it's a very, very fast, tiny web browser. Well, apparently they have an article called H3V, a Dillo killer. H3V is a new web browser that's also very tiny, very, very fast, and renders actually exceedingly well. Now, I actually did go and check it out. It's a great little browser, and I invite everybody out there who's running Linux, and particularly on desktops that might not be super powerful. But what I find interesting about the article and why I'm mentioning this right now is a Dillo killer? Come on! What is it? Why is it that we're such a violent society that we have to bring in killing and violence and so forth into free and open source software? I mean, good grief! Why can't one project exist alongside another? Hey, I mean, what? It's gonna be a Firefox killer next. That's just killer? A little over the top. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, on that note, I'm gonna go back to my coffee and I'm done for the day. Weird, weird, weird. Seriously. Bye.